Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Man of Steele podcast. I have a very special guest today, Joe Abraham. You may have heard of him. If not, he is what you call an angel father or part of the angel family. He tragically lost his daughter about a year ago. Her name was Katie Abraham, and she was only 20 years old. And it's a very tragic situation because the car that she was in, was rear-ended by someone who crossed the border illegally and was not supposed to be here. And so we're going to talk about this situation and so forth and how it relates to the larger politics. But let me have Joe introduce himself, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Eli. I appreciate you having me on. So Katie was my youngest daughter. I've got three kids. She's my youngest. She was on a trip with some friends to the University of Illinois, which is in Urbana, Illinois. And they were just visiting some friends at the University of Illinois. Katie was a student at Ohio University. So they were just there for the weekend. And she was at a stoplight on one of the streets in Urbana, right in front of the hospital there. Their vehicle was rear-ended at almost 80 miles an hour. And they were in a little Honda Civic, and the SUV that rear-ended them at 80 miles an hour is being driven by a drunk driver who was an illegal alien who had been previously deported and re-entered. He was using an alias, a Mexican national alias. He was a Guatemalan national, and decimated the vehicle. So Katie died on the scene. Another friend of hers died in the hospital the next day after completely devastating these lives and the damage that was caused by this reckless behavior. He fled the scene. He didn't stick around to help. He didn't stick around to help first responders understand what happened, and maybe they were able to maybe respond quicker. He just ran. He fled. Then we learned that he left Urbana, ended up in Chicago, and then was apprehended sort of south of Dallas, north of the border, I think around Milford, by U.S. Marshals. And that same day, the U.S. Marshals knew that this wasn't Julio Cuco Bull from Juan Suarez from Mexico. It was Julio Cuco Bull from Guatemala. So federal law enforcement knew he was using an alias. Illinois clearly did no vetting for identification, and so he was, entered in without any issues on the Illinois side. But it's just a devastating thing, Eli. It's a phone call you get that the detectives are on the other line. They're talking about how your daughter's dead, and it's something you can never prepare for. It is like your just heart drops in your stomach, and someone just kicks you in the chest. It's just so gut wrenching that any family has to go through what we have been through the past year, and then on top of that, to have Illinois respond in the way that it has, which is complete, utter silence and disrespect of Katie and her situation and how she died so violently.
Absolutely. And I think what makes this a real tragedy is the fact that it's a different thing if a citizen is killed by a citizen. I mean, that does not lessen the devastation. But when a citizen is killed by somebody who is not here legally, that just adds the whole dimension of who's responsible for that. It just adds a whole different dimension to the tragedy, because you feel like if we had upheld the law, this would have never happened. It's one thing when somebody violates the law on equal standing, but this is not equal standing. But before we go into all of those details, why don't you tell the listener who Katie Abraham was? What was she like as a person?
So Katie was such a bright soul in our family. She had such a great wit. Her sense of humor was so incredible. Her storytelling, she loved the water. She took to water right away. She was a water polo player, did really well, excelled at that. She was also a swimmer. She always said she felt more comfortable in the water than on land. And she loved music, eclectic taste, anything from country to sort of the new music folks are listening to now. I'm not real familiar with it, but her and I would get together when she would want to hear country or back the old rock and roll from like the 70s, 80s, alternative from the 90s, grunge, that kind of thing. So she was open to so many different things. She was like a little sponge in all of life. She just enjoyed life. She was good at everything she did. She encouraged people. She made everyone seen and heard and inclusive for everyone. And that's why, to be honest with you, most people say, Katie wouldn't like what's happening here with ICE and this, that, and the other. And Katie was a compassionate, for sure, loving person. But there is no way anyone can tell me Katie would look back and not reject the way she violently died. And Katie had a sense of fairness, right? So Katie's perspective wasn't that you get to break all the rules and then, no consequences, and there'll be forgiveness later. There can be no forgiveness without any real consequences. That's something to me that's very fundamental and basic. And so I don't believe that Katie would say that, if ICE is saving lives, which I think they have, if they're pulling out really bad people from the communities, people don't even realize the lives that are being affected in a positive way. So it's unfortunate that it's not tangible. You can't see it and touch it, but you know it's there. So yeah, I don't believe for a minute Katie would have rejected the Midway Blitz operation that would have saved lives. I just wish someone was looking out for Katie like now I think Katie's looking out for others. And the one thing, Eli, I got to tell you is you see a lot of these sob stories. The media is so one-sided in their compassion, just like our politicians. Everything's one-sided. You see a lot of these lawbreakers or rule breakers being sort of pulled out of the streets. And let's be honest, Governor Pritzker and Preckwinkle and Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, they want ICE in the streets because they need the chaos out there, because ICE has to go out there with a presence, right? They can't just send one or two guys out to apprehend anyone. They need a whole presence to go with them to secure things. As the rhetoric, the hyperbolic rhetoric from our politicians have created a hostile environment for these guys to operate within. So instead of working with them, where you could do it sort of, behind the scenes, it doesn't have to look like this. You could do this in an orderly fashion, but they need the chaos in the streets. But here's what bothers me on the one-sided media chaos. No one has talked to me about, hey, Joe, how does it feel that your daughter's vehicle had to be pried open like a tuna can so her dead body can be pulled out and recovered? You never see that. You never hear about that. You only hear about this person or that person who broke all the rules and could be a criminal or a gang member, but oh my goodness, we have separated them. But I'm separated. I'm Katie was disappeared. She was snatched away. She was taken. I will never see her again. That's the difference. She's not in a detention center and she's not in another country. This illegal alien, along with aid from the state of Illinois and the politicians, have disappeared my daughter forever.
And she was she was 20 years old.
20 years old, just 20 years old.
And obviously, going to college, preparing for her whole life and whole dream, having her own dreams of what she wanted to become. Not only did she mention, the loss of, her future. That's something that you guys would never have, never experience. You raise them to become somebody. You raise them to become productive citizens. And that's something that you were robbed of in a way. And I think, most people are in favor of legal immigration coming through the system. I mean, my own family is part of that as well. But there is a difference, I think, with the Biden administration, where they just turned a blind eye, opened the border, and never has to suffer the consequences of their own decision. I mean, so high above us, they have security, all of that, but they never have to deal with the reality on the ground. And I think that's what it's just an underlayer of tragedy where they say, okay, we're good people, we should let people across the border. Some people may have to pay the price, but so what? I mean, that's the, and you just happen to be one of those people that had to pay the price. And I think you mentioned in our earlier conversation the phrase selective compassion. And it's like they have compassion for the people coming across the border. But none of these people who are responsible for those people coming across the border seem to have any compassion for you. Is that the case?
Yeah, my family does not qualify for any compassion for whatever reason. I think it's because we're law abiding, we're productive, we pay the high gouging taxes that our politicians put on us. It's interesting to hear them talk about corporations gouging here and there. They are the largest gougers of anybody, right? They only know one lever to pull, and that's take more money from the people. That's the only lever they have. And that's just not really, if you come down to it, there's no creativity in anything when you do. We can get a 9-year-old to do that. We don't need politicians to come up with that solution. It's a non-solution. But yeah, the fact that you look at someone like Katie and how they've broken that chain. And it's not just that they took Katie's life, right? She got a death sentence without any due process. She got a death sentence without any sort of trial, and her family, we have a life sentence. So Julio Cucabol got a plea deal. He'll spend some time in prison, but our whole family's in prison now. So I don't care that he's in prison. They should have vetted him out and filtered him out, and it could have easily been done if they had minimal cooperation with the federal law enforcement. And Katie could be alive right now, but she got death penalty. We all have a life sentence. We are sitting in a cold, dark jail cell ourselves. Julio Cucabol will get out at some time. We will never get out. We're stuck here. And we were put there, not only by Julio Cucabol, who for sure killed Katie, but the environment he was in that allowed Katie to be killed was man-made. It was self-serving politicians with political sort of ambition. They only are thinking of themselves and where their next step is. And I'm sorry, and I believe Katie would feel this as well. The choice here is not unfettered, unvetted, unhealth screened, unlimited immigration or nothing. See, that's not the choice. That's just a false choice. So you can't be a racist and a bigot if you don't accept their terms. That's not leadership, and those are not real terms, right? So, for example, Julio Cucabol, in open court, federal court, said he had HIV, he was being treated for HIV now that he's incarcerated. He was using an alias. He did not read or write in any language, no formal schooling at all, and he didn't speak English. Okay, so right there's 4. He had been previously deported, let back in, no background checks to see that he was using an alias, no health screens for this guy, just on where's the compassion for him? You didn't even health screen this guy. He's running around with HIV in our communities. He said this in open court. I have the transcripts. I was in the courtroom when he said that, when they asked him if he's being treated for that. And then what were you doing for job training for this guy? How to assimilate? How were you educational support? What were your plans for a Julio Cucabol, which I suspect of the 600,000 that you let in, I don't think everyone was a doctor, lawyer, and engineer. I think you needed to provide some support, and Illinois did nothing like that. So I want to know what systems were in place there that you're allowing everybody and anybody, and then how are you helping them? How are you helping them not only from a health standpoint, but from education, training, job training, and then how are you helping them assimilate into the communities to understand what it is to be a good citizen? So to me, it just feels like, because I'm not getting answers, it's all silence. It feels like they've done nothing. They've just opened the doors, kicked the side door open, Eli, let 500, 600, 700,000 people in, without knowing who's who in the zoo. And it just seems like a Wild West free for all. And people like my family are suffering because of that. So,
Not just your family. Another girl died in that car, and three other girls were also fighting for their lives. So that's five people in just one car. They suffered. And one thing that I think puzzles a lot of people that I've talked to about this is the politicians seem to have no sympathy for you, seem to have no compassion for what your family has been through. Why is that the case? It seems like, okay, there's got to be some other motivation at play. And do you have any thoughts on what that may be?
you know, I mean, I have my suspicions just being a long time, lifelong Illinoisan and a Cook County resident. I suspect I don't have any proof, but look, they're losing citizens left and right in Illinois. I mean, they're losing population. So I suspect they need bodies for the congressional apportionment, for federal funding. I suspect at some point they thought amnesty was coming, so anyone they can get in would become voters right away. I don't even know, my gut tells me I have no proof. I'm just a lifelong Illinoisan that sees how they fix this state and a Cook County resident and see how Chicago and Cook County operate. I suspect there's some ballots tied to these warm bodies because in Illinois, I suspect it's not so much voters, it's actually more ballots. So if you can get some ballots out there, then you could kind of distort the voters roll. Have no proof, just Joe's 2 cents, living in Illinois all his life to see how they run things around here. So that's the only thing I can think of. And obviously, political ambition. These folks are self-serving. They think this is the path towards higher office, which is very odd for me. I mean, if you see how Illinois runs, the only folks that think Illinois is a good run state are the people running the state. No, I can't believe anyone else believes this is how a state should be run. Living here all my life.
Yeah, by the way, I did include a small section that we're having of the strategy into the White Guilt film that I'm doing with my father. And in that clip, Governor Pritzker is before, I believe, the Congress, and he's being asked if he has any thoughts about the illegal status of Julio, the person who killed Katie. At first, he offers his condolences in front of in front of these people. He offers his condolences to you, supposedly, but he's not saying it to you directly. He's saying it to these elected officials. And then at the point, he refuses to answer that one question, and he keeps saying, "No, that person is deserves due process," and so forth, which may be what's required under law. But what's misty is, has he ever spoken to you directly about this? Has he ever come to you?
He has never spoken to me. I was looking forward to that congressional hearing. I thought he would approach me. I didn't feel it was my place to go up to any politicians. I just assumed, because they all say they're compassionate, they care about their citizens. I just assumed he would come up and talk to me. I was sitting right behind him. There's no way he didn't know who I was. I would never buy that. That would be an untruthful thing that if that's how he would position it. But yes, he did acknowledge that, was it sincere? I don't think so. But what he kept saying was, people, he protects all residents. He conflates citizens, legal immigrants, and illegal immigrants, conflates them all. We're all the same. We're just residents, right? So, me as a lifelong resident of Illinois, someone who walks over to the border day one is the same as me, just for some perspective on that. So, and what he kept saying is, and if they do wrong, they will have their due process and be adjudicated in Illinois, which I struggle with because all I was asking from him is, what was your front end process? Because if you just have a Wild West and anyone comes in, and just like any population, there's no population in this world where there's 100% positive, good people. You have, just like citizens, there's good and there's bad, just like productive and unproductive. It's human nature. So you're bringing you're bringing immigrants from everywhere. You can't assume 100% are good to go and they're going to be solid citizens making no trouble. You got to make a distinction, and you got to have a front end process. I don't care about the due process and his jail time. I'm devastated now. And this could have been avoided if you had a front end process. At least vet the people that are coming in minimally and check them for some health. This guy was running around with HIV. So do some minimal work on your end. You've nullified federal law, right? So you said, well, we don't follow federal law here and we don't do immigration. So you throw your hands up and it's nothing. You nullify federal law and you don't step in and fill the void. You just let it happen and say, it's not my deal, it's federal deal. And then you say, well, if they do something wrong, if they kill Katie Abraham, don't worry, Joe, we're going to have some due process for him. He'll go through his due process and then he'll, get some jail time for you. So you should feel good about that. I don't. I wish he never came here. I wish he stayed in Guatemala. I wouldn't be in the jail cell myself and my family wouldn't be suffering and Katie would be alive. But they have no compassion for regular people. They just need certain amount of numbers. I don't know what they're really doing because no one will talk to me. And that's a disappointing thing. I'm a lifelong Illinois resident who was completely ignored after losing his daughter on the streets of Urbana. It's ridiculous.
Sadly, you're approaching the first year anniversary. So you've been on this journey for a year and you still have not, I'm assuming you still not have received any satisfactory answer or any type of policy action that will safeguard for people like Iran. For the audience, I know that you are an American citizen born here, but I believe your father is an immigrant. Can you tell us about that, like how he came to the country and how that informs your view?
Yeah, so my parents were immigrants, and certainly not the way it looked here. They were legal immigrants. They followed the process. It took them years. He came from a third world country. He would tell you right off the bat, there's not 100% good people coming out of third world countries. He would tell you that right off the bat. You need to make sure that they're going through the same sort of a rigorous process to understand who they are they who they say they are. So you need some identification verification. You should have some background checks. You should have some health screenings. So yeah, my dad, and when he came here, Eli, he wanted to be here. There was a reason for him to be here. He did not want to take anything from this country. He believed in it. He wanted to come and participate in it. He was not going to be a spectator in this country. He was going to provide back, and he was going to provide a productive family, which he did. 5 productive kids, and he's got 8 grandchildren. He passed away in 2024. But, the immigration that I see through my dad, and it does not look like today. And it shouldn't look like today. And it's unfortunate because, rather than Governor Pritzker being sort of thoughtful and putting a pause, saying, hold on, let's maybe reevaluate what we're doing here. There's some people that have died along the way. There's some crimes that are being committed. There's people being victimized. Let's put a pause. Let's understand what we're doing. Can we do better? He doesn't do that. There's no sort of consideration. There's no service. It's just arrogance. What I'm doing, and we're going to go full speed ahead, and I'm doubling down. He behaves like an authoritarian. So understand this. He calls Donald Trump an authoritarian. And what is he doing in our own state? There's no way you put these two together. There's no way you can say the one's an authoritarian and the other one isn't. If Trump's an authoritarian, you're 2 times the authoritarian. Okay, so I don't buy that at all. And leadership isn't a governor saying, what is Donald Trump for today? Is he for this today? Then I'm going to take a 180 and be for that. If you think that's leadership and that's going to get you to your next step, because he doesn't really care about being the governor of Illinois, he thinks he's going to achieve to some higher level. I hope the voters see right through that and really, really make him pay for that in the ballot box. All his money notwithstanding. I know he will spend hundreds of millions of dollars and support a lot of his fellow politicians, but hopefully, again, the voters can see through the money and they can see through the hyperbolic language and they can see through the inconsistencies and really take care of him through the ballot box.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it in the way we talk about him. The governor behavior as an authoritarian. It seems like he's behaving from probably the worst of human values, which is the political level. Politics is just gutter. I mean, it's in the gutter, and he's not operating from any human. I mean, a politician always has to have that humanity to pull them out to be able to respond to larger things, but he's just operating from pure political motive, it seems. Because how else do we explain the selective compassion? And I recently saw a clip of him where he basically said, we are waiting until the Democrats get back into power. And when the Democrats get back into power, we are going to go after ICE. We are going to name them and we're going to put them in jail. And what was interesting for me was the passion that he had in that statement. And I'm thinking about you, and he has none of that for you. But he has more passion to play the political game rather than the human reality. Do you have any thoughts about that? About that? About that new statement?
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there. This is a game for him. He is an aloof billionaire. This is a political game he's playing. There's no human effect on this. So this is all partisanship. This is all gamesmanship. This is all just straight up political game for him. I don't know how else to call it, because then he sets up this Illinois Accountability Commission, right, to go after ICE and these guys. And it's disgusting because I'm waiting for my Illinois Accountability Commission for the victims, right? What did they do? What did their policies do that harmed all these victims? And he should be talking to every victim of his policies, not just me and Katie. He should be out there as a human being talking to everyone that was negatively impacted by his policies. And there are plenty. But here's the thing that just strikes me so odd, because you got someone like him and the Democratic Party here that run this state. They talk about diversity, inclusion, this, that, and the other. I'm going to be honest with you here. I went and met with dozens of ICE agents in Chicago here during Midway Blitz. I wanted to do a little bit of homework. What I saw, Eli, was something that the Pritzkers of the world should be celebrating. I saw the most diverse workforce I think I've ever seen, never saw anything like this in corporate America. I've always been corporate America. It was the most diverse, professional, cooperative. And these were at least 100 in the room. I met dozens of them. And I'm thinking to myself, this is everything they talk about: diversity, inclusion, cooperation, professionalism. It was all there in DHS and ICE offices. I'm shocked no one's amplifying that and talking about, wow, look at these guys. This is what a diverse, effective, professional workforce should look like. Instead, they just go out and they say derogatory things toward them. Then I went to Broadview, was at Broadview, and saw the makeup at Broadview, the majority being old white people. I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, these are the heroes and these are the villains. The world is upside down if that's the case. And it's amazing to me that the Pritzkers and Preckwinkles and Johnsons don't see that and don't champion that and don't say, look at how effective these guys are and what they do, and look how diverse they are, and look how professional they are. But they only want to go to the sob stories. They want the big numbers in the streets so they can play to that. They can be performative. It's not real and it's not compassion. And I want the voters really to see through that. I mean, they've got to be able to see through that. It's so obvious to me.
Yeah, I think it's real blind. They're blind. I mean, they have their own ideology, and that's what matters the most to them. The political power. When you operate on a level of political power or ideological power, humanness takes a back seat, and humanity takes a back seat because it gets in the way. It's an inconvenience. And that is what I think makes it evil in a way, because the governor can't even, or even your local rep can't even come to you out of compassion because they've gotta stick to the policy, and I think that also reflects us Americans. And I think that if you look at the '80s, you were kind of a weird guy if you walked around in a Reagan shirt or a Mondale shirt. I mean, that was just a little weird, like you were a political animal. But now we've all become political animals. It's just taking over us so much, and maybe that's where our morality is at. But before we go on that, can you tell people though who don't know what Operation Midway Bliss was and how that's related to Katie?
Yeah, Midway Blitz was an operation by ICE. They had identified a certain number of hardened criminals, a certain number of, say, gangbangers, murderers, pedophiles, these type of things, worst of the worst, right? So when they had contacted me, they had said, "Look, we're going to do this thing in Chicago. We want to get the worst of the worst out. We're going to start with that. We have a lot of work to do, but we want to start with the worst of the worst, and we would love to honor Katie in this operation." So I just asked a few questions about exactly what they're doing, and I was satisfied with all their responses. And I said, yeah, Katie would absolutely be on board with removing these types of people that will not victimize others, right? So unfortunately, again, comes back to that tangible. People can't see, wow, we've had so many X amount of less victims because of this, but it's out there and it's real. So it was basically ICE's operation to come into Chicago, get a targeted number of hardened sort of criminals, worst of the worst, and then sort of move from there. So, and that's kind of, Eli, when I went down, I visited, had a, addressed the ICE agents, got to meet so many of them, and saw the contrast between what was happening in the streets and who these folks were. So that's how that came about. Now, DHS and ICE and the White House, Donald Trump's administration, whatever you want to say about them, these folks have been responsive, caring, compassionate, authentic, right from the get go. They've been working with us. What can we do for you? How can we help you? What's happening? Do you need anything from us? So the contrast between Governor Pritzker and his administration and Donald Trump and his administration, honestly, in my view, night and day, not even a comparison. When we met Donald Trump in the White House, he was genuine, authentic, caring. You could see in his face, he was moved by the fact that I lost my 20-year-old daughter. And he didn't have to do that. Governor Pritzker, I'm a lifelong Illinoisan. Governor Pritzker probably doesn't even know who I am, even though I'm sitting in the room 10 feet away from him. He didn't have any time to even look in my direction. So that's how much he cared about Katie and her life. It's such an amazing contrast. And again, I want Illinois voters to understand that this is not what the media tells you. Now I understand the media needs to make a living. They need Pritzker money. I get that, but this is not what they're telling people. Governor Pritzker is not a compassionate person from what I can see, from my place, from my seat. He's not. He hasn't shown one bit of empathy or caring to a lifelong Illinoisan and his murdered daughter, and it's very unfortunate. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has been, till this day, contacting us.
You made a very interesting point about how we don't see the success of these operations. What we see in the media, and I live in LA, so if you watch the local news, it's all about, first of all, I never get any numbers on bad guys that were arrested. We don't see that. It's just more about somebody's grandmother or somebody like that, or so forth. But we never see the full picture. We never get the full picture. And you made an interesting point, which is that you can't quite measure the success because if you, how many? I think I saw the article and they had a whole bunch of documented arrests of illegal immigrants who have been convicted of DUI. It was something like 10 of them, right?
I don't know the exact numbers, but they've pulled, I want to say around 3,000, which include sort of DUI
Oh,
folks. I just don't know the
3,000
breakdown.
criminals?
Yeah, like I think it's around 3,000 criminals they've already removed, and I think some of that does have DUIs, but I think it's a mixed bag. That's like in total, so that would be everything from people in gangs, DUI, pedophiles, murderers, rapists, these type of things. And I know they had a number in mind. It was probably, I'm just going off the top of my head, it's probably wrong, but I think it was like 4 or 5,000 people they had in mind in Chicago that they wanted to get out of our communities because it's they're public safety threats, right? And
So
so
that
I'm
are
not sure
many,
why that's
that many people in Chicago alone.
that
Wow.
they identified
Wow.
that they yeah, they're probably more, but that's just who they sort of identified as the worst of the worst.
They crazy. They crazy.
Yeah. And let's be honest, Julio Cucabol, I would say, isn't necessarily the worst of the worst, but he has done so much damage. And I'm sorry, but Illinois has to accept some responsibility for that. They allowed him in without any guidance. They just threw him to the wolves. He had no idea what was happening from mountainous regions of Guatemala, thrown into Illinois, using the state like a playground, an ATM machine, and whatever else. So the state never set him up for success, only set him up for failure and families for suffering. That's all they did. And instead of, again, pausing and saying, you know what, maybe we overdid this. Let's give it a pause. Let's reevaluate some of the things. They don't. They go all in because they're authoritarian. They're a super majority. They don't care about what the voters are thinking or saying. This is why I'm so maddening to watch someone like Governor Pritzker say Donald Trump's authoritarian and democracy is on, on trial. Meanwhile, he's acting worse than authoritarian. And this state is so, if you think about this state being a supermajority, um, it has been so distorted by our politicians on one side that this state should never be a one supermajority state. It just shouldn't. I mean, I think Trump got what 44, 45% of the vote, but we're a one party supermajority state. That's how severe they fix this state.
Yeah. What I can't get over with your strategy is how politicians seem to just show so much compassion to people who shouldn't even be here. Almost everybody I know in my family or even LA are legal immigrants. And they tell you, especially coming from Mexico, they raided in Tijuana. They lived in Tijuana for 5 years. They've suffered hardship in Tijuana. They've been exploited in Tijuana. Some of them have been raped in Tijuana. It's not easy to become a legal immigrant. And then they wash all the others just come across the border without doing any just cut. I mean, you know how angry we are as Americans if somebody cuts the line in anything.
Yeah,
We get pissed.
yeah,
And so it's
yeah.
so they have the same reaction, probably even more so. And it hurts the legal immigration process. So I think when people like Governor Pritzker and so forth, rather than put the emphasis on the legal process, they seem to put all the emphasis on the illegal process as some sort of humanitarian gesture and then turn around and call anybody who objects a racist, the white guilt phenomenon, and they get you transform our society and with no consequence, except, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe the consequence is they get more political power. And
Mhm.
meanwhile, obviously, the other consequence is that you lose your daughter. I think that's something the Americans have been asked to. Do you want to live without consequences? And
Yeah, and they only care about it in the abstract. You're absolutely right. This is their compassion and their caring is in the abstract, not the concrete. They don't really, it doesn't matter to them. But here's also the thing. They talk about compassion for these illegals they're trying to get better. So they're, let's give them the benefit of the doubt here, Eli. Let's just assume their good intentions are what they are, just good intentions. They want to do right by folks. Let's just assume that because I don't believe that for a second, but for the sake of this argument, why don't we look at the outcomes and the effects of the policies you've put in to help these people? Because what you've done now over the last 4 or 5 years, you've got the majority of Americans saying, pause immigration. We don't necessarily want it right now. It got too out of control. So you've overplayed your hand. You've You've the effects of your policies have done the opposite. People want less now immigration. So your outcomes of your own policies are in conflict with what you're saying you want. And there's no pause. There's no, geez, let's reconsider this because we don't want that. As a family of immigrants, we don't want that. We want people to be able to come here legally and have this experience. But these guys, they might have overplayed their hand for 4 years and maybe they don't care after that, but certainly they've really poisoned the well when it comes to immigration, and they did that. And they should own it, and they won't.
Yeah, I mean, they really have destroyed that. One thing I did want to bring up, because I think what we're kind of talking about in a way is what is the contract between the elected and the citizen? And Edmund Burke, talks about it. I think he calls it the social contract. And there's a quote that I have from him, and it says, "To be looked on with other reverence, because it is not a partnership in things, subservient only to the gross animal existence of its temporary and perishable nature. It is a partnership in all science, a partnership in all art, a partnership in every virtue, and in all perfection. At the end of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations. It becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born." And I think, that's one of the best expressions, because others like Rousseau and so forth thought of this partnership, the contract between the elected and the citizen as something temporary, almost like a contract. But Burke is basically saying that the contract belongs to the Asian. It is literally a creation of Russian civilization. It's wholly in the red. And when we have our governors just abusing the social contract, removing us from that contract by force, by annihilating us, by taking somebody like you and ghosting them. He's not allowing you to be part of that contract, and he's reaping all the benefit. I mean, I that's why I have a lot of sympathy for you in your position, because I would not want to be in that position, and nobody else I think would want to be in your position. And it is horrible that you have to be in that position, and it makes it worse because it's almost like kicking the horse when it's dead.
Yep. And I've talked about that before. It's a great quote and it's a great read. So if we look at it on my end, right? Law abiding, I'm productive, I pay my taxes, and I've raised good children out of trouble, right? So I'm not sure what else I could do on my social bargain. But if I didn't do any of those, I would have men with guns at my house if I failed on any of those. So when your daughter, your youngest daughter, loses her life sitting in a car in the streets of Urbana, Illinois, because you allowed some guy unvetted, unchecked, unaudited to be running around the streets of Urbana like it was his backyard, smashing into a car at 80 miles an hour. He had been pulled over before in Urbana, got no consequences. I don't even know how many times he got pulled over, but no consequences. So Illinois knew about this guy. They just did nothing about it. So did they fail on their bargain? Did they fail their social contract? I'd have to say in every aspect, 100% failed. But here's the hook and the frustration and what keeps you up at night and the salt in the wound. What is my recourse? Again, if I did nothing, or if I didn't hold my end up with a bargain, I'd have men with guns at my house. What is my recourse? They failed in every aspect. Easy fixes, things that could have absolutely been preventable. things that are so fundamentally simple, rudimentary, that you couldn't get it figured out in Illinois. It was so difficult, couldn't get it figured out. And now, I want to know what can I do? What is my recourse? I have to just sit here and do nothing, continue to be law abiding, pay taxes, and be productive and keep working for these guys. It's so frustrating. And then you get complete silence on their end. So it is one of the toughest pills to swallow over the last year. Is not only the way Governor Pritzker behaved in his administration, but the whole social contract piece of it, the whole front end vetting where you just didn't care about your communities and things were just a wild west out here. That's all it was. You threw in hundreds of thousands of people in the middle of the night, kicked the side door open, let them all in the dark of night. No one even knew what was happening. Next thing you know, you wake up and your state looks and behaves completely different than what it ought to be. A law-abiding, productive, good state, well-run state, and we're just not there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other dimension of this is that when you watch that congressional hearing with Governor Pritzker, and you see him offer this criminal due process, in a way, he's giving that guy the social contract. He's basically extending his social contract to somebody who's not here in the country illegally, and I think that's really a testament of how perverted our like you said earlier today, everything's upside down. You know, what's up, what's down. How perverted this whole thing has become, because where's his social contract to you, and where's his obligation to you? And for him, you're a political liability. I mean, do you think that he wants you to basically shut up and go away?
I don't think he spends 2 seconds thinking about me. I'm not a politician. I'm not a powerful bureaucrat. I'm just someone who lived in Illinois all his life, was productive, paid taxes. He doesn't care about me. I want voters to know if anything happens on their end, this is what's going to happen to you as well. You have no state government behind you. To your point, Julio Cucabol got more social bargain than I did. Let's understand that. I've been law abiding all my life, lived here all my life, dedicated myself to Illinois all my life, paid my taxes. He shows up already being deported, showed up again, fake documents like you wouldn't believe. That's why I can't call him undocumented. The guy got more documents than I did. And he wasn't productive, wasn't working. State didn't help him in any way. So that where's the state's responsibility? So I mean, everything's just I'm the only one that pulled the weight here. And that's the frustrating thing. The state left me high and dry. Julio Cucabol was left high and dry, and Julio Cucabol had more consideration than me and my family. That's again what voters got to understand. If anything happens, you are last in line. Everyone else is ahead of you. You have no exemptions. These folks have all the exemptions. So just be aware of that as well. And that's not the way things should work here in this country. Sorry. You don't give exemptions to one group of people at the expense of other groups of people. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, I do really, really thank you for coming on and really sharing your story. And before we get off, do you have any thoughts, like really about, I guess, the question of justice? I mean, it seems like you may not think that may be possible, but how are you moving forward with this strategy? Like, do you have any goals in mind of what you want to do with this?
I mean, this year has been a constant battle, a day-to-day, hour-to-hour battle. What I'm hoping, and it's never going to be the same. Life will never be the same. Katie was such a bright, beautiful person. To not have her in this world, the world is a worse place without her, in my view. So I'm hoping maybe this year we can try to get back to as much normalcy as we can. I certainly will continue to speak out because I feel like I must, because of the disrespect and the way they treated Katie in her death, almost like a piece of trash, a garbage that could be thrown on the side of the road and be ignored. Katie was a better person than that. She was better than any of these guys. The way they've behaved over the last year, Katie would have never been like this. She was such a good person. And to see them and their policies take away someone like Katie, it's just a tough thing to get through, Eli. It's going to be a difficult road for us, a difficult journey. We're trying to do the best we can right now. We'll probably end up doing something in Katie's name so her name can continue to live on, despite how Illinois has completely rejected her and others like her. Because again, I can only speak to Katie. I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Katies out there, and not necessarily killed by illegal aliens, but you know, people are dying every weekend in this city, and no one seems to really care or do anything about it. It's just the same old, same old. And unless we start moving these people out of office from the ballot box, I think the voters will continue to get what we get.
Yeah, I think one of the ironies is that you're not a very political guy. I've always spoken to you a couple of times, but what I think comes across is how American you are. I mean, you are exercising your full rights as a citizen, and I think you should be commended in the way for trying to make some meaning out of it. I mean, I think that's the least that we should do. I mean, if I was in your shoes, I would hopefully have the courage and the strength of you to be able to do what you do. So I hope that you know that your voice has a lot more power, that you may be able to see in your own way. And I kind of know this. My own father has had to fight his own battles and so forth. And sometimes he even wonders, what is it for? Who's listening? Then you get an email one day, or you get a letter one day, and it shows that people have listened to you, have fought their own battles inspired by you. I know that's not much of a solace, but I think that you are having a more of an impact that you realize. I mean, after all, we're connecting on this. And so, before we get off, do you have anything you want to say to America?
I continue to speak because of the disrespect that they gave Katie, and that's what sort of keeps me going. And the fact that they, think Katie is not worth sort of responding to, that's what keeps me going. And I do want voters to know that, like me, you probably will not qualify for their compassion. And they do only have a one-sided compassion, and they govern with arrogance, personal ambition, no humility, no sense of service or duty. It's all self-serving, Eli, from what I can see in Illinois. And I really, really pray that the voters sort of wake up to this and really respond to this, because again, this is not just about Katie. This is about so many others. And unless these folks get moved out, unfortunately, things are going to continue, and it's going to be the same. You're going to get these double down on awful policies, never reevaluating, never looking inward to see if they're really doing the right thing for the citizens versus themselves and their party. It's just a very sad state that we have right now in Illinois, and I feel terrible about it. I don't know how much longer I can be here. I might become one of these Illinois refugees that has to leave and go to another state. Clearly, they don't want me here anyway. So I just hope it turns around. I hope it doesn't get too late, and I hope we see some change, because we can do better, and we should be doing better.
Thank you, Joe, really for coming on and for sharing your story. And I hope that it makes a difference. So, thank you for coming on.
Eli, thank you, and hopefully we can talk again in the future. I enjoyed the time here, and it was great speaking with you.
Yeah, we'll keep in touch for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.